memorable life challenges that I've had have to do with, to some degree, some form or another of discrimination. I hate to bring that up, but one life challenge was in recognition. When I was leaving Howard and going to Harvard, I was looking for a full-time job because I knew that my tuition would be enough to cover. So I was looking for a job. I sent in an application to the government of Boston to apply for a position as an architect. And naively, I thought that I'm going to Boston in New England, which was the land of the Kennedys, where I thought there would be some form of liberalism or, recognition of diversity. But I applied for a job as an architect to City Hall in Boston, and I submitted my resume and I was scheduled for an interview. It wasn't a challenge, but the first thing I observed is there were no black people in downtown Boston except for one guy who was sweeping the street. And then I went into town hall and I went to the front desk and she asked me what I was there for. I said, I have a scheduled interview for the architect vacancy. And she rumbled her papers and she said, I'll be right back. Let me go back and check. And I heard this mumbling in the background. And then she came back and said, I'm sorry, that position is filled or is no longer vacant. So I said, okay, I know what that means. But that was one. The second life challenge was, which I felt great success from, was, I think I mentioned earlier, when I was applying to the architecture school at Howard. I was greeted by a counselor who was a white architect named John Brown, who interviewed me for my application. And he knew I was being conditionally admitted. And he said, well, Mr. Brooks, I'm going to allow you to be accepted into the school, but quite frankly, I don't think you have the aptitude to be an architect. So I thanked him. He said, I wish you well. I said, fine, thank you very much. Now, a couple of decades later, after I'd gone to graduate school, after I had was working at the DC Office of Planning and I was chief of urban design. One of the professors had passed away at Howard University. And the mayor had decided he wanted to name a special day in his honor. So the director of the planning department said, Terry, you went to Howard, didn't you? You graduated? I said, yeah. I said, well, I'm not going to go to this. He asked me, but I told the mayor, I want you, because you're a Howard graduate, to present this honor at Howard University. So he gave me the certificate signed by the mayor, and I showed up as the guest speaker. And before I was called to the stage, I saw Leon Brown, the guy that had interviewed me. And I said, you don't know me, do you? He said, no, I don't recall. I said, well, I remember you. And I remember you distinctly telling me that you didn't think I had the aptitude to be an architect. I said, not only did I become an architect and graduate from here, I also went to Harvard, chief of the urban design, and I have been called upon to be the guest speaker on behalf of the mayor to make this declaration today. And he looked at me and said, well, I guess I was wrong. And I said, yes, you were wrong. So that gave me a great deal of gratification. So that was one. Another obstacle I faced was when I worked at the Park and Planning Commission. The director he respected me. We got along. I did my job, he did his. But I found he was too political. And what he was doing, unfortunately, he was hobnobbing with the county council members, doing special park projects for them to make them look good so that when they ran for reelection, they would have a project that they could point to that they did. The unfortunate part about that relationship is that he was unilaterally reassigning staff that were assigned to projects that the budgets have been approved for to other things that were not in their work program, which meant the production level of the division was going down, which was causing some consternation among the council members because they allocate a certain amount of money and they expect a certain level of projects to be developed during any particular fiscal year. And I found that out by interviewing all my staff saying, well, I've got 5 projects, but 2 of them are political projects that are not in the program that the director has asked me to do. And I've got to do what the director tells me to do, that kind of thing. So I found a way to get by him by adding additional staff to supplement that to get the work done. And the productivity level rose to be not only on par, but equal to and exceeding, in some cases, other departments that required capital improvements money. But my biggest challenge to him was I was being successful, but I was also a little, he liked everybody to being kind of a yes, sir person. I was not that. I was never that. And I knew what I was doing. So, and I would challenge him on occasion. So the worst challenge I had for him was when he decided he was going to embarrass me and he was going to demote me in front of my colleagues who were other division chiefs, all white. I was the only black division chief they had, in front of them, and said, he's going to make me no longer a division chief in charge of park development. He was going to make me his special assistant, which meant I was obligated to do whatever he wanted me to do. And he was going to assign a younger Caucasian civil engineer to take my position. So I didn't like that, obviously. But I had to grin and bear it because I had obligations. But there came a situation where, again, because of his expediency, the director's expediency, we had legal obligations for funding projects, which meant if you were allocated a certain amount of money, that money had to be spent within a fiscal year. And you do that by contract. And the contract would be bid upon by a bunch of folks, and whoever had the lowest bid that could fulfill the scope of work won the contract. So we had a major project that the bids came in above the budget. And we couldn't fund that project. And you can't undo what's been bidded because that would be unfair to those that, and it would take too long, and it couldn't be spent in the fiscal year. So my director came to me and demanded that I call the president of the company to lower his bid, which is illegal. And I told him to his face, I cannot and I will not do that. I can't do that. And he mumbled something. He said, I could have you fired. I said, I know you could. And he said, all right, give me his contact information. I'll call him. I said, here's his business card. So after that meeting, I went to my office, and I have a habit. I kept very prescriptive records in my file. It was all done on computer. But I have a habit where there were some questionable things that went that I think needed to be taken care of and documented, I would maintain two files. I'd have a file that would be saved in the office files digitally, and then I'd have a copy that I would send home to my personal file, because I can't control the files in the agency. They may be erased, but the ones at home don't go anywhere. And it happened to be at this time, I wrote a memo to the file about my conversation with my director and what he directed me to do and what he said he was going to do. And so I kept a file in the office and I sent a file home. And I kept another paper file in my desk. And something happened. So I'm sitting at my desk one day and I get a call from general counsel. He was a good friend of mine. We dealt with a lot of contract issues, so we had a good relationship. But he said, Terry, you recall this project, which was a neighborhood playground project? And I said, yeah, I remember it distinctly. He said, did you have any files about anything that happened on that? I said, yeah, I wrote a memo to the file. And he said, you still have a copy of that? I said, yeah, I got it in my desk. He said, make a copy for me. I'm sending a messenger over right now. He'll be there in 15 minutes to pick it up. And lo and behold, the messenger came there and I gave him the file in the envelope. And a week later, I found out the director had retired. And after that, maybe 3 or 4 months after he retired, the director calls me and asks me if I would have lunch with him. I said, fine, I'd have lunch with him. So he took me out to lunch and he apologized for what he had done. And he asked me, or he didn't beg me, but he asked me would I forgive him for what he did. And I said, yes, I forgive you. I'm not bothered by that. But I said, what you did in front of my colleagues, and you didn't apologize to them. And I just left it at that. After I was the director's special assistant, a new director came in. And it was a woman who was with the National Park Service. And she promoted me back to my original division chief position. And I became her special assistant in addition to that. So that was my reward. And she also recommended me for a bonus at my retirement, which was rather substantial, which I appreciated, which helped fund my special trip to China.